It was a sweltering summer afternoon when I received a knock on my door that would change everything. The sun was high, casting shimmering reflections off the surface of my beloved swimming pool. As I stepped outside, I was greeted by two representatives from the Homeowners Association, HOA, their expressions grave. They informed me that due to an alleged violation of the community's water usage policy, they had taken the drastic step of draining my pool. Wasting water, they called it, as if saving every drop was worth the joy I derived from those refreshing dips. Shock and disbelief washed over me. My pool had always been a source of relaxation and enjoyment, especially during the scorching heat. Had I truly been wasting water? Thoughts raced through my mind as they explained that this measure was meant to protect our local resources amid an ongoing drought. Yet, as they spoke, a sense of injustice bubbled beneath the surface. After they departed, I couldn't shake the feeling that something felt off about their approach. Sure, conservation was important, but I had always taken care to use water responsibly. As I began to process the events that had just unfolded, I realized there might be more to this situation than meets the eye. With a determined resolve to understand my rights and responsibilities within this community, I set out on a journey that would uncover not only the truth about my pool but also reveal my surprising position in controlling the neighborhood's water rights, a twist I never saw coming. As I dove deeper into the intricacies of water rights, I began to understand the complex web that governs how water is allocated and used in our community. Water rights can vary significantly from one region to another, often influenced by local laws, historical usage, and environmental conditions. In many areas, these rights are a crucial part of land ownership, dictating who can use water resources, how much they can use, and for what purposes. In my neighborhood, the HOA had established a set of guidelines aimed at promoting conservation amidst ongoing drought concerns. However, as I delved into legal documents and state regulations, it became clear that these rules were not as straightforward as they appeared. I discovered that water rights often include both surface water, like lakes and rivers, and groundwater accessed via wells. In certain regions, rights could even be tied to the property deed itself, offering protections against arbitrary restrictions. Armed with this knowledge, I began to question the HOA's authority over my pool situation. Had they overstepped their bounds? I learned that homeowners could indeed retain specific water rights that allowed them to manage their own consumption within reasonable limits. This realization was empowering. It shifted my perspective from a passive victim of HOA policies to an informed participant in a larger conversation about resource management and individual rights. As I pieced together these insights, I felt an exhilarating sense of purpose, a mission to challenge the HOA's actions while advocating for fair treatment among all residents in our community. To understand how my pool ended up drained, I knew I had to retrace the events leading to that fateful decision. It all began with an unusually hot and dry summer, with temperatures soaring well above normal. The local news frequently reported on the dwindling water levels in nearby reservoirs, spreading concern throughout the community about our collective responsibility for conservation. In response, the HOA had ramped up its outreach efforts, sending out newsletters and holding meetings aimed at educating residents on water conservation. While I appreciated their attempts to foster awareness, I had been following their guidelines closely and felt confident that my pool usage was within reasonable limits. Yet, it seemed that others in the neighborhood were not as diligent. Complaints about excessive water use began to circulate. One afternoon, I noticed some neighbors scrutinizing my backyard from across the fence, whispering amongst themselves. I dismissed it as mere gossip until a few days later when the HOA representatives knocked on my door. They claimed that my well-maintained pool was contributing to water waste and that they had decided to take drastic action. As they explained their reasoning, I felt a mix of disbelief and anger. It became evident that they were using broad interpretations of their guidelines without considering individual circumstances. Their actions felt like an overreach of power and unjust punishment for what I believed was a responsible use of resources. It was clear to me now. This wasn't just about water, it was a clash of authority and rights that would demand my attention and action. After the initial shock of my pool being drained, I was eager to understand the formal notification process that had led to this drastic action. The HOA had a system in place for communicating violations, but I realized that their methods were less than transparent. It started with a vague notice slipped under my door, claiming I was in violation of water conservation rules without specifying which guidelines I had breached. The notice provided little context, simply stating that my pool usage was deemed excessive during a drought. There was no direct communication before the draining occurred, no attempt to discuss the matter with me or clarify the accusations. Instead, it felt like a swift and ruthless decision made behind closed doors, lacking any semblance of due process. As I examined the notice more closely, I noted how it referenced community meetings that I had attended but never clearly defined what constituted excessive water use. It was as if they expected everyone to intuitively grasp their vague criteria, leaving me feeling isolated and targeted. Victimized by a lack of clear guidelines, I wondered how many others had received similar notices without fully understanding the implications. Determined to address this injustice, I began gathering evidence of my responsible water usage and reaching out to neighbors who might have faced similar situations. Armed with this information, I planned to confront the HOA and demand accountability for their actions. The more I uncovered, the clearer it became that the notification process itself needed scrutiny, an essential step in reclaiming not just my rights but those of my fellow homeowners as well. When I first learned that my pool had been drained, a wave of disbelief washed over me. I stood in my backyard, staring at the empty concrete basin where countless summer memories had been made. The vibrant blue water, usually so inviting, was replaced by a stark and disheartening sight that echoed the HOA's heavy-handed decision. Anger quickly followed, along with an unsettling sense of vulnerability. How could they do this without even discussing it with me first? My thoughts spiraled as I replayed the moments leading up to their action, every conversation at community meetings, each email from the HOA stressing conservation importance. It felt surreal that I could be singled out for what seemed like an arbitrary judgment. I mulled over the countless times I had diligently taken steps to conserve water, ensuring my usage aligned with community guidelines. Had my efforts gone unnoticed? Hours turned into a restless night as I wrestled with my emotions. Part of me wanted to retreat and accept this unjust fate, but another part ignited a fire within me. This was more than just about a drained pool, it felt like a personal affront to my rights as a homeowner. I realized that I needed to channel this anger into action. With determination replacing despair, I resolved to gather evidence of my responsible water use and challenge the HOA's authority. No longer would I allow myself to be a victim in this narrative. With a newfound determination, I set out to research the intricacies of water rights and how they apply to my situation. My first step was diving into local laws and regulations, which revealed a fascinating history of how water rights have been shaped over time. Various legal precedents and community agreements had constructed a framework that was both complex and surprisingly empowering. I started by visiting the county clerk's office, poring over documents that outlined water allocation policies specific to our area. I learned that in many regions, homeowners held certain entitlements regarding water usage, often based on their property deeds. This discovery sparked hope. If I could establish that my usage fell within regulated limits, I might have grounds to contest the HOA's claim. I also spoke with local water rights experts and environmental lawyers who could clarify the nuances of these laws. They emphasized that homeowners not only have rights, but also responsibilities regarding resource stewardship. Equipped with this knowledge, I realized the HOA's guidelines did not supersede the legal protections afforded to me as a homeowner. As I compiled notes and gathered evidence of my responsible practices, like regular pool maintenance and efficient usage, I felt an increasing sense of empowerment. The meticulous research became not only a means to confront the HOA but also a reclamation of my confidence in managing my property rights. This journey through local ordinances shifted my perspective from being a victim of circumstance to an informed advocate ready to challenge any oppressive oversight within our community. Armed with my newfound knowledge of water rights, I stumbled upon a surprising twist, the realization that I had control over the neighborhood's water rights. As I pored over historical documents and legal frameworks, I discovered that my property was not just bound by HOA regulations, it also included certain entitlements that gave me a stake in our community's water management. This revelation felt like unearthing a hidden treasure, one that could shift the power dynamics in my favor. I learned that as a homeowner, I had the ability to influence how water was allocated and utilized within our neighborhood. This control was not merely theoretical, local laws permitted residents like me to vote on water use policies and projects impacting shared resources. The more I delved into this aspect of homeownership, the more emboldened I became. With this newfound authority, I brainstormed ways to unite other homeowners who might share similar frustrations. Perhaps we could organize a community meeting to discuss our collective rights and push back against the HOA's heavy-handed tactics. I envisioned a coalition of informed residents advocating for clarity in guidelines and equitable treatment for all. This twist of control not only empowered me but also provided a pathway to transform our neighborhood's approach to resource management. Instead of feeling like a victim, I now felt like a leader, ready to assert our collective rights and challenge the status quo. It was time to reclaim not just my pool, but also the spirit of community engagement within our neighborhood. With a renewed sense of purpose, I decided it was time to engage directly with the HOA. I drafted a letter outlining my concerns and requests for clarity regarding the guidelines they had enforced, especially concerning the recent drainage of my pool. I made sure to include references to local laws that supported my understanding of water rights, framing my arguments in a way that emphasized collaboration rather than confrontation. I proposed a meeting with the HOA board, eager to present my findings and discuss the possibility of more transparent communication regarding water usage policies. To strengthen my position, I reached out to several neighbors who had also felt the impact of the HOA's decisions. Together, we formed a small coalition dedicated to advocating for fair treatment and improved guidelines. When the meeting day arrived, I felt a mix of excitement and nervousness. As I walked into the community center, I was met with wary glances from the board members. However, I stood firm, presenting our collective concerns and suggesting that we work together to create clearer and more equitable water usage policies for all residents. To my surprise, some board members were receptive, acknowledging that communication could be improved. We discussed implementing regular community forums where residents could voice their concerns and share their own experiences regarding water conservation. This dialogue sparked a newfound sense of collaboration that hadn't existed before. I left the meeting feeling hopeful. This was just the beginning of transforming not only my situation but also fostering a stronger sense of community engagement among my neighbors. As news spread about my challenges with the HOA, a wave of responses from the community began to emerge. Initially, there was skepticism. Many neighbors were hesitant to take sides, unsure of the full circumstances or wary of stirring conflict with the HOA. However, as I continued to share my findings and experiences at various gatherings, whether casual chats at local parks or neighborhood barbecues, the tide slowly began to turn. Several residents approached me privately, expressing their own frustrations with the HOA's policies. Some had faced similar drainage actions or overly strict enforcement that left them feeling oppressed. Others felt neglected by an administration that prioritized guidelines over individual circumstances. This shared dissatisfaction sparked a sense of camaraderie among us. We began discussing strategies for collective action, emphasizing that we could unite our voices for change. When I organized an open community forum regarding water rights and conservation practices, attendance surprised me. Neighbors filled the community center to discuss how we could advocate for clearer guidelines together. That meeting not only served as a platform for voicing concerns but also helped forge new connections among residents who previously felt isolated in their frustrations. The conversation transformed from one of fear of reprisal to one of empowerment, fostering a renewed sense of community engagement. Residents began sharing ideas about respectful cooperation with the HOA and standing firm against perceived injustices collectively. As more people joined our cause, it became clear that we were on the brink of significant change, not just for myself but for our entire neighborhood. Our united front stood as a testament to what collective resilience could achieve against authoritarian oversight. As the momentum of community support grew, we finally entered the resolution phase, a critical moment that would determine our future relationship with the HOA. After our initial forum, the board agreed to meet with a committee of residents, including myself, to discuss potential changes to the water usage guidelines and improve communication channels. In preparation for this meeting, we compiled comprehensive feedback from community members on their experiences with the HOA's policies. Our goal was clear: we wanted to create a more transparent process that would allow homeowners to voice concerns before drastic actions were taken. I took the lead in presenting our collective findings, emphasizing not just my personal experience but also the shared frustrations of many families in our neighborhood. The discussions were constructive, with several board members expressing a genuine willingness to reconsider their approach. We proposed establishing a task force that included both residents and HOA representatives to draft new guidelines that reflected realistic water conservation practices while respecting individual rights. This collaborative spirit marked a significant shift from previous interactions. By the end of the meeting, we reached a tentative agreement to pilot these new guidelines and hold regular town hall sessions where residents could engage directly with HOA leadership. The sense of unity among homeowners was palpable. It felt like we had reclaimed our voices. As I left the meeting, I felt a mix of relief and hope. The process had transformed not only my situation but also fostered an environment where residents could actively participate in shaping their community's future, a victory for all of us. Reflecting on this journey, I realized that several important lessons emerged from my experience with the HOA and the community's response. First and foremost, I learned the significance of understanding one's rights, especially regarding homeownership and shared resources. Knowledge proved to be a powerful tool. It empowered me to challenge the status quo and advocate for fairness. Additionally, I discovered the importance of community engagement. Initially, I felt isolated in my frustrations, but as I connected with neighbors facing similar issues, I recognized that collective voices are far more potent than individual ones. This experience taught me that building a supportive network can lead to meaningful change and foster a sense of belonging within the community. Moreover, the necessity for clear communication became starkly apparent. The vague notifications from the HOA highlighted how easily misunderstandings can arise when guidelines lack transparency. Advocating for open lines of communication not only helps prevent conflicts but also encourages collaboration among residents and governing bodies. Finally, I learned that resilience is key in confronting authority. Though there were moments of frustration and doubt, persistence ultimately led to productive dialogue and positive outcomes. Standing firm against unjust actions inspired others to join the cause, creating momentum for change. These lessons have left a lasting impact on me, shaping my perspective on community involvement and advocacy. As we move forward together, I am hopeful that our efforts will lead to a more equitable and engaged neighborhood, one where every homeowner feels empowered to voice their concerns and participate in decision-making processes. As I reflect on this transformative journey, it is clear that my experience with the HOA has not only changed my own perspective but has also ignited a collective movement within our community. The draining of my pool was a catalyst for deeper conversations about rights, responsibilities, and the importance of transparent governance. It has become evident that when individuals come together, they can reclaim their power and reshape their environment. Looking ahead, I envision a community where homeowners are actively engaged in dialogue with the HOA, ensuring that policies reflect the needs and values of all residents. Our recent initiatives, including regular town hall meetings and the formation of a task force, will serve as platforms for ongoing collaboration. We aim to create guidelines that are fair and equitable, allowing for responsible water usage while respecting individual rights. Moreover, I hope to inspire other neighborhoods facing similar challenges to advocate for their rights and engage in meaningful discussions with governing bodies. This experience has taught me that empowerment begins with knowledge and that resilience can foster significant change. In the future, I envision our neighborhood not just as a collection of homes but as a thriving community where every resident feels valued and heard. Together, we will continue to push for transparency and fairness in resource management and governance. Ultimately, what began as a personal struggle has blossomed into a shared mission to create a more just and engaged community, one where everyone can thrive and contribute positively to our collective future.